Once while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw two boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night, but have caught nothing. Yet, if you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled their boats, so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw them, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, follow your gut. Follow along. Follow your dreams. Follow your instinct. Follow in the footsteps of. Follow your heart. These phrases I mentioned speak to a longing of some sort. A sense to move in a direction without being convinced or certain of where one might end up, and yet feeling compelled to act on that impulse. My husband Dwight and I made a decision in 2016 to do just that. Follow our heart, our gut, our instinct. All the phrases I just mentioned would fit. And we left our home of some 25 years. We left our house, friends that we love, family on both sides, and memories of first being married, parenthood and careers. We traded a 1766 farmhouse for a 19-foot trailer. We purged our lives of furniture, clothes, and so much more, until we were left with ourselves, our dogs, the bare-bone basics, and a few luxuries like some technology and really comfortable lawn chairs. We left what had been comfortable and certain, and were excited to embrace a new chapter. We had no plans, no idea where we would end up. We were embracing the luxury of being able to start a new chapter. So the last time I found myself in the pulpit was September 4th, 2016. That's exactly 889 days ago, but who's counting? It was a couple of weeks before we got into that trailer and headed out. As I look back to that Labor Day, Sunday, our country was in the middle of a presidential campaign, one that was based in fear, prejudice, and divisiveness, and one that looked like just an anomaly. A cloud of otherness had taken hold, replete with untruths and alternative facts, propping up a distorted reality. But a narrative I was certain wouldn't. A narrative I was sure couldn't stick. I was distracted by the excitement for our upcoming adventure, and so I let myself feel confident that all would be well. Well, as we know, that anomaly of a campaign became our new reality a short 2 months later, on November 8th. And I asked myself then, and now, how did we get here? But truth be told, there are many people who know how we got here. To them, there were no surprises, just an affirmation of their marginalized voices and a confirmation of their censored struggle. After I left the church, I was unsure if I would ever preach again. but David can be persuasive. And once more, I never imagined that I would return to the pulpit in times such as these, when, as it turns out, all is not well. So I stand before you always a reluctant preacher, but a feisty, restless Christian and a huge Jesus fan. And I mean the Jesus who hung out with people on the edge, the oppressed, the sick, the poor, the powerless. The Jesus who demanded justice, expected radical hospitality, and loved absolutely, even if it meant death, which of course we know it did. Jesus, the man who spoke truth to power from that othered place and challenged the status quo of the time. That is the Jesus I know and want to reclaim from those voices who have hijacked the Christian story and have made it unrecognizable. So yes, I'm a fan and a follower. And our text this morning speaks to that Jesus that I've come to know. We find him today at the beach, climbing into Simon's boat, asking him to move away from the shore so he could preach to the crowd gathered at the beach. And once in, like any good rabbi, he sat down and began to teach. What follows in the story is the call of the first apostles, with a particular emphasis on Simon Peter, the first to sign up for this movement, the first to follow their gut. These first apostles are fishermen, and as we would expect from Jesus, they did not live lives of privilege. Most peasant fishing families at that time were poor and lived for survival, or if you will, paycheck to paycheck. While there was a small minority, of course, of elites that held the bulk of the wealth and the power. Income inequality has a long and ugly history indeed. Alicia Batten, professor of religious studies, describes the economic environment of the time. The Roman Empire was extractive insofar as production and distribution served the interests of the powerful, not those who actually performed the labor. Peasant fishers and processors had little to no control over the fees for fishing licenses and toll rates. It's reasonable to conclude that such an economic situation was largely one of exploitation. I feel like we just heard someone describe many families living in our times today. But Jesus begins his ministry, begins this movement of turning the world upside down in boats and beaches. He enlists the most vulnerable and marginalized to whom opportunity was unavailable and access to power denied, which includes his own circumstance. Reverend Tracy Blackman, the Associate Minister of Justice and Local Church Ministries for the UCC, speaks to how Jesus, his own status, is relevant. This is why it matters that Jesus did not come as a person of great privilege, but rather as an Afro-Semitic Palestinian born on the wrong side of the tracks. She goes on. It is from this context that Jesus begins a movement, and it's from this context that Jesus invites others to follow. Plainly speaking, he gets it. The story continues when Jesus asks Simon to go out into the deep water. Here is the carpenter asking a fisherman to move out to deep water in the middle of the day and throw out his nets. And Simon, I imagine, with a silent shaking of his head and rolling of his eyes, in spite of his doubts, listens and moves them out to deep water and throws out his nets. What happens next, as we heard, is a magnificent surprise of abundance and wonder, and a tender moment of reassurance as Jesus says to Simon, "Do not be afraid." And because of this aha moment, their minds and their lives are suddenly changed. Simon, John, and James put down their nets and decide to follow Jesus. And what's what's so extraordinary is that in the midst of a virtual windfall, they abruptly leave their old lives and follow him. How empowering, how transforming to finally be seen, to be heard, to be valued. How life-giving it is indeed to be liberated. The legacy from that first boat ride of those first fishermen who said yes, who accepted an invitation to follow and to say no more, is one of discipleship. On that day, those fishermen were seen, were loved in a way they had never been before, who were given a glimpse of God's just world. And they saw themselves as Jesus saw them, powerful, able, and deserving. They were the ones who said yes to doing the hard work of transforming this world. And so this many years later, we sit together as a community who continues to follow, to witness in our mission and our work, and to say no more. A community that continues to strive to transform and reveal God's just world. Here we say no more to stories like Mary Turner's. No more to the stories like Laquan McDonald, a 17-year-old African-American man murdered by a Chicago policeman. A scenario that's more common than not. No more to the stories on the border where so many more children than we originally thought would never be reunited with families. And our witness here happens in the conversations and the work of the Racial Justice Initiative, in knitting for peace, in making room for the Black Lives Matter and WHI. Our witness happens when almost $20,000 of the offering is donated to all of those stories. It is, as Reverend Blackman describes, showing up as an ally for the movement of our times. She says, allies show up with their bodies, their gifts, their skills, to follow Jesus. Knowing that the invitation to the ally is always to follow the leadership of those who are at the center of the pain. And choosing to work towards liberation of any kind requires a commitment to support the narrative of the ones who own the story. The role of the ally is not to lead or to fix. The ally holds the story and amplifies the voice of the storyteller. So I wonder if you have any idea what Sunday, July 18th, 2021 is. Nope. It's exactly 889 days from today. And as we know, a lot can happen in 889 days. David will be preaching, and many of you, and maybe more, will be sitting right here. And because I'm an optimist, and because I am optimistic, there is also a good chance that the current administration will be gone. Either way, we will be wounded, and there will be important work to be done to heal ourselves and to heal each other. And given all that has transpired in these past 189 days, it feels like it's time for us to imagine us being pulled into deep water like those first fishermen. To imagine where our place is, to use Reverend Blackman's words, in the movement of our time, before the next 889 days go by. How do we see ourselves as disciples at this moment in time? What does discipleship look like in our efforts to support the narrative of a just world? Are we prepared to be comfortable being uncomfortable as we move in a direction without being convinced or certain of where we might end up? Like those fishermen, we too will have doubts, disagreements, and disappointments in the work if we keep choosing to answer yes. But how can we say no? Poet and author Clarissa Pinkola Estes writes, "What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts. Adding to, adding more, continuing. Know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, the second, or the 100th gale." I am glad that Dwight and I followed our gut, our dreams, our hearts that brought us to Park Hill. And I look forward to the next 889 days, and I hope many more. Amen.
Amen.